What would you do if the people who destroyed you in your lowest moment suddenly realized you owned everything they thought was theirs? This woman didn't have to do anything. She just stayed quiet. And when the truth came out, it destroyed them faster than any revenge ever could. Welcome to Reality Stories Hub. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view. Sometimes the worst moments of your life happen in the places where you should feel safest. That's what happened to Sarah on a Tuesday afternoon in Seattle, in a house that would soon reveal secrets nobody could have imagined. Sarah was 28 years old, sitting in the corner of a beautiful room with windows so tall they seemed to touch the sky. Outside, rain fell softly on the streets of Seattle, but inside, everything felt cold and hard. She wore a simple black dress. No makeup. No fancy jewelry except for one thing, a small gold bracelet her grandmother had given her years ago. She kept touching it, turning it around her wrist, like it was the only thing keeping her together. Her grandmother had just passed away. The funeral was that morning. Sarah's eyes were still red and swollen from crying. Her heart felt like it had been ripped in half. Her grandmother was the only family she really had, the only person who truly understood her. The room was filled with strangers, lawyers in expensive suits, people she'd never met claiming to be distant relatives. They all stood around talking in quiet voices, waiting. A man named Mr. Peterson stood at the front. He was the estate lawyer, and he looked nervous, shuffling papers, checking his watch. Sarah didn't hear the door open. She was too lost in her sadness, too numb to notice anything. But then the room changed. People stopped talking. Heads turned. And then she heard a voice that made her stomach drop. "Sorry we're late, everyone." It was Daniel, her husband, the man she'd been married to for 4 years. The man who promised to love her forever. Sarah looked up slowly, and her heart broke all over again. Daniel stood in the doorway. And he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him. Her name was Jessica, though Sarah didn't know that yet. Jessica was tall and confident, wearing a tight dress and high heels. She had her arm wrapped around Daniel's waist like she owned him. Daniel walked into the room like Sarah wasn't even there. He smiled at everyone and said, "I want you all to meet my wife, Jessica." The room went silent. Sarah felt like someone had just stabbed her in the chest. Wife. They weren't divorced. They were still married. Legally married. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Her throat was too tight. The pain was too big. Daniel's mother, Patricia, jumped up from her seat with a huge smile. She rushed over to Jessica and hugged her. "Oh, sweetheart. Welcome to the family. Isn't she beautiful, everyone?" Daniel's sister, Lauren, whispered to someone nearby, but loud enough for Sarah to hear. Finally, he upgraded. People laughed. Actually laughed. Sarah's hands shook in her lap. Tears rolled down her face, but she couldn't wipe them away. She felt frozen, like her body wasn't her own anymore. Patricia turned to Sarah then. Her smile disappeared, replaced by something cold and mean. She walked over, her shoes clicking on the marble floor. "You can leave now, dear," Patricia said sweetly, but her eyes were like ice. "You're not part of this family anymore." Daniel's brother, Connor, laughed from across the room. "Man, I don't know how you stayed with her this long. She's so boring. No personality at all." Jessica walked right up to Sarah and looked down at her with a smirk. "No hard feelings, honey," she said. "He just needed a real woman." Sarah couldn't breathe. The room felt like it was spinning. Everyone was staring at her, judging her, mocking her. Mr. Peterson, the lawyer, tried to speak up. "Please, everyone, let's show some respect here." But nobody listened. They were too busy celebrating Daniel's new life, too busy making fun of the woman he'd left behind. Sarah stood up slowly. Her legs felt weak. She didn't say anything. She didn't yell or scream. She just stood there, tears streaming down her face, holding onto that gold bracelet like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Patricia laughed again. "Look at her. She can't even speak up for herself. Pathetic." Lauren nodded. "Daniel, you really dodged a bullet. She was always so quiet and weird." Sarah turned toward the door. She couldn't take any more of this. She just wanted to disappear. But before she could leave, Mr. Peterson spoke up. His voice was different now, firm and strong. "Mrs. Sarah," he said clearly, "you need to stay. This reading concerns you directly." Daniel laughed. A loud, mocking laugh that echoed through the room.
"Why?"
"She's not family anymore. She has nothing to do with this." Mr. Peterson adjusted his glasses and looked at Sarah with something that looked like respect. "Actually, sir, that's not true at all." But nobody was listening to him. The damage was already done. Sarah stood there, broken and humiliated, in a room full of people who were supposed to care about her. What none of them knew, what none of them could have ever imagined, was that every single thing they were standing on belonged to her. This wasn't just a house. This was her house. And they had just destroyed her in her own home. But Sarah didn't say a word. Not yet. She just held onto her grandmother's bracelet and remembered what her grandmother had taught her all those years ago. "Stay quiet, my darling. Stay strong. Let them show you who they really are." And they were showing her. Every single one of them. To understand how Sarah ended up in that moment, you have to go back. Way back to a small town in Oregon where the rain fell gentle and the streets smelled like pine trees. Sarah grew up in a tiny house on the edge of town with her grandmother, Ruth. Her parents had died in a plane crash when Sarah was only 6 years old. Her grandmother took her in without hesitation, raised her like she was her own daughter. Ruth was a quiet woman. She didn't talk much, but when she did, her words mattered. She worked as a software engineer back when women in tech were rare. She'd come home late from work, tired but smiling, and she'd always make time for Sarah. They'd sit at the kitchen table doing homework together, or reading books, or just talking about life. Ruth taught Sarah everything.
She taught her to be kind,
To work hard, to never judge people by what they had, but by who they were. She taught her that the loudest people in the room were usually the most insecure, and that real strength came from staying calm when everyone else was losing their minds. When Sarah was 10 years old, her grandmother gave her a gold bracelet. It was simple, nothing fancy, but it was beautiful. "This was mine when I was your age," Ruth said, fastening it around Sarah's small wrist. "I want you to keep this forever, and I want you to remember something important." She knelt down so she was looking right into Sarah's eyes. "Real wealth isn't about money or things, sweetheart. Real wealth is quiet. It's about who you are when nobody's watching." Sarah didn't fully understand back then. She was just a kid. But Ruth made sure she understood eventually. What Sarah didn't know, what Ruth never told her until much later, was that her grandmother wasn't just a software engineer. Over 40 years, Ruth had quietly built a technology empire. She created software that hospitals used, programs that helped schools, systems that made businesses run better. She started small and grew it into something massive, but she never told anyone. She didn't wear designer clothes. She didn't drive expensive cars. She lived in that same small house in Oregon, helping her neighbors and living simply, because that's who she was. When Sarah turned 21, Ruth sat her down and told her the truth. "When I'm gone, everything I've built goes to you," Ruth said calmly. "But I need you to promise me something. Don't tell anyone about this. Not your friends. Not a boyfriend. Nobody. Let people show you who they really are first. If they love you for you, they'll be happy when they find out. If they only want you for what you have, you'll already know." Sarah promised. She kept that secret locked in her heart, just like she kept that bracelet on her wrist. Years later, when Sarah was 24, she met Daniel at a coffee shop in Seattle. He was charming and confident. He came from what seemed like a successful family. He had a good job as a marketing executive. He drove a nice car. He knew all the right things to say. He told Sarah she was beautiful. He told her she was special. He promised he'd love her forever. Sarah fell in love. Hard. She thought she'd found her person, her forever. They dated for 2 years before he proposed. She said yes without even thinking about it. They got married in a small ceremony. Nothing big or expensive. Sarah didn't care about a fancy wedding. She just wanted to be with him. But Daniel's family was different. His mother, Patricia, barely tolerated Sarah. She'd make little comments all the time. "Sarah, you're so plain." Or, "Daniel, are you sure about her? She's just so simple." His sister Lauren would roll her eyes whenever Sarah spoke. His brother Connor barely acknowledged she existed. They saw Sarah as beneath them. She worked as a volunteer coordinator at a children's hospital. She lived simply. She wore normal clothes. To them, she wasn't good enough for Daniel. And they made sure she felt it. But Sarah never corrected them. She never told them about her grandmother's wealth. She kept her promise. Let them show you who they are. And they did. When Ruth died suddenly from a stroke, Sarah was destroyed. She cried for weeks. She couldn't eat. She couldn't sleep. She felt like half of her soul had been ripped away. Daniel tried to comfort her at first, but he didn't understand. He didn't know what Ruth meant to her. He didn't know about the bracelet, the lessons, the love. He just saw a wife who was sad for too long. And it annoyed him. 2 months before the will reading, everything fell apart. Daniel started coming home late. He'd say he was working, but Sarah could smell perfume on his shirts. She found text messages he forgot to delete. Little hearts and kisses from someone named Jessica. Sarah's heart broke more each day, but she didn't say anything. She wanted to believe it wasn't true. She wanted to believe her husband still loved her. But deep down, she knew. Jessica worked at Daniel's company as an accounts manager. She was everything Sarah wasn't: bold, loud, flirty. She'd walk into Daniel's office in tight dresses, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm. And Daniel loved the attention. He loved feeling wanted by someone who didn't challenge him. Patricia noticed too. And instead of telling her son to stop, she encouraged it. "Son, you deserve better than that quiet, boring girl," Patricia told him one day. "Jessica has fire. That's the kind of woman you need." Lauren agreed. She even invited Daniel and Jessica to family dinners while Sarah was busy volunteering at the hospital.
Connor laughed about it.
"Jessica's got energy, man. Sarah's just dead inside." Daniel started believing them. He started seeing Sarah the way they saw her.
Boring.
Quiet. Not enough. He'd come home and pick fights over nothing. He'd criticize everything about her. The way she dressed. The way she talked. The way she existed. And Sarah took it all in silence because she didn't know what else to do. One night, Sarah couldn't take it anymore. She found another text message from Jessica. This one was worse than the others. More explicit. More real. Her hands shook as she confronted Daniel in their bedroom. "Daniel, are you seeing someone else?" He looked at her like she was stupid. "So what if I am?" His voice was sharp and cruel. "You don't give me anything, Sarah. No excitement. No passion. Nothing. You're like a ghost living in this house." Sarah felt her entire world collapse. "I love you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Well, I don't love you," he shot back. "I don't think I ever did." Those words cut deeper than anything she'd ever felt. Daniel packed a bag that night and left. He moved in with Jessica. He didn't even look back. Sarah collapsed on the floor of their bedroom, clutching her grandmother's bracelet. She cried until there were no tears left. She stopped eating. She stopped talking to friends. She became a shell of herself, empty and hollow. Patricia called her a few days later. "Just sign the divorce papers and move on, Sarah. You were never good enough for my son, anyway." Sarah hung up without saying a word. She just stared at the wall, feeling nothing. A week later, an envelope arrived in the mail. An official notice about Ruth's will reading. It was scheduled for 3 days from now at an address Sarah didn't recognize. She looked at the paper, her heart aching. She hadn't told Daniel or his family that her grandmother had died. She'd kept it to herself, buried deep with all her other pain. The address was for a beautiful estate house in Seattle. Sarah had never been there before. She didn't even know her grandmother owned it. But she decided to go. Alone. Which brings us back to that room. That terrible moment. That humiliation. Sarah stood there, ready to walk away from Daniel and his family and Jessica and all of it forever. But Mr. Peterson stepped forward. His voice was steady and firm. Mrs. Sarah, please. You must stay. This reading concerns you directly. Daniel laughed again. Louder this time. Concerns her? She's nobody. She has nothing to do with this. Mr. Peterson adjusted his glasses and looked Daniel straight in the eyes. Actually, sir, Mrs. Sarah is the sole beneficiary of this entire estate. The room went silent. Not the kind of silence where people are just waiting to speak. The kind where the air gets sucked out and nobody can breathe. Patricia's smile disappeared. Lauren's laugh died in her throat. Connor's smirk vanished. Jessica's hand dropped from Daniel's arm. Daniel looked like he'd just been slapped. What? He whispered. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat and opened the official document in his hands. Before I continue, let me be very clear. Mrs. Sarah is the sole heir to Ruth Thompson's estate. Everything you see here, everything her grandmother owned, has been left entirely to her. He began reading the will out loud. His voice was calm and professional. The estate house you are currently standing in, valued at $900 million.
People gasped.
20 commercial technology properties across the United States, valued at $5.3 billion. Patricia put her hand over her mouth. Shares in Thomson Software Systems, valued at $12 billion. Lauren looked like she might faint. An investment portfolio, valued at $15.2 billion. Connor just stared at the floor, his face pale. Mr. Peterson paused. He looked around the room. The total value of this estate is $33.4 billion. All of it goes to Sarah. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. It felt like the world had stopped spinning. Sarah stood there, still holding her grandmother's bracelet. Slowly, she sat back down in her chair. She wiped the tears from her face with the back of her hand. For the first time in months, her voice was steady.
Calm.
Powerful. Mr. Peterson, she said softly. This house. How long did my grandmother own it? Mr. Peterson looked at her with deep respect. Your grandmother purchased this estate 42 years ago, Mrs. Sarah. Sarah nodded slowly. She turned and looked directly at Daniel. Her eyes were clear and sharp. Every family dinner you hosted here, every holiday party your mother planned, every celebration your family held in this house. She paused, letting her words sink in. You were guests in my home, and you treated me like garbage in my own house. Patricia's mouth fell open. Lauren looked like she might collapse. Connor couldn't even look up from the floor. Jessica tried to grab Daniel's hand, but he pulled away from her like she was burning him. Daniel, Jessica started. But Daniel wasn't listening. His face had gone completely white. His hands were shaking. He stared at Sarah like he was seeing her for the very first time in his life. Sarah stood up. Her shoulders were back. Her head was high. She had never looked more powerful. No, she said firmly. You don't get to speak. You don't get to explain. You don't get to apologize. You showed me exactly who you are. All of you did. Lauren stepped forward, her voice desperate and shaking. Sarah, we didn't know. No, Sarah cut her off. You didn't know because I kept my grandmother's wishes. She told me, let them show you who they really are. And you did. You mocked me. You called me pathetic. You brought another woman into my home and humiliated me at my grandmother's funeral.
Connor tried to speak.
Wait, Sarah. We can talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, Sarah said. Her voice was ice cold. Mr. Peterson, please have security escort them out of my property. Mr. Peterson nodded. Right away, Mrs. Sarah. Security guards appeared at the doorway. They were professional and calm, but firm. Patricia's face went from desperate to angry. You can't do this.
We're family.
Sarah looked at her with no emotion. No anger. No sadness. Just cold, hard truth. No, Sarah said quietly. You never treated me like family. And now you never will. The security guards began escorting Patricia toward the door. She fought against them, her voice getting louder and more frantic. This is insane. Sarah, you can't just throw us out. We've been nothing but good to you. Sarah didn't respond. She just watched as they led Patricia away. Lauren grabbed her purse, tears streaming down her face. Sarah, please.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. We made a mistake. Please give us another chance. But Sarah shook her head. You had 4 years to treat me with respect.
You chose not to.
I'm just respecting your choice. Connor didn't even try to argue. He just walked toward the door, his head down, shoulders slumped. Security escorted all 3 of them out of the mansion. Their voices echoed down the hallway, angry, pleading, desperate. But Sarah didn't move. She stood there in the silence, finally alone. Well, not completely alone. Daniel was still there. He stood frozen in the middle of the room, staring at Sarah like his entire world had just collapsed. Which, to be fair, it had. Jessica was still there too. She looked around the massive room, at the expensive furniture, the beautiful artwork, the chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. Her face had gone from confident to confused to angry in about 30 seconds. She turned to Daniel, her voice sharp. Daniel, I thought you said your family was rich. I thought you had money. Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't. He was still staring at Sarah. Jessica's eyes narrowed. Are you telling me you're broke? Still no answer. Jessica grabbed her designer purse from the chair and stormed toward the exit. I'm not about to be poor with you. This is ridiculous. She pushed past Daniel without even looking at him. The door slammed behind her, and the sound echoed through the mansion like a gunshot. And then there were 2, Sarah and Daniel, alone in the massive room. Daniel took a step toward her. His hands were shaking. His voice cracked when he spoke. Sarah, baby, please.
Wait.
Just wait. Sarah turned to look at him. Her face was calm. No tears. No anger. Just exhausted sadness. I made a mistake, Daniel said, his words rushing out. A huge, terrible mistake. Jessica means nothing to me. Nothing. I was confused. I was stupid. You were exactly who you wanted to be, Sarah interrupted quietly. You chose this, Daniel. You chose to humiliate me. You chose to betray me. You chose her. She gestured toward the door where Jessica had just left. Sarah, please. Daniel's voice broke. I love you. I've always loved you. We can work this out. We can fix this. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but devastating. You know what the saddest part is, Daniel? If you had just loved me for me, all of this would have been ours. We could have built a beautiful life together. We could have done so much good in the world. But you didn't love me. You tolerated me. And the moment you thought you found something better, you threw me away like I was garbage. That's not true, Daniel started. You introduced another woman as your wife while I was grieving my grandmother, Sarah said. Her voice got stronger. You looked me in the eyes in my own home and called someone else your wife.
Do you know how that felt?
Daniel fell to his knees. Actual tears were running down his face now. Sarah, please. Please don't do this. I'll do anything. Anything. Sarah walked toward the door. She stopped and turned back one more time. You don't love me, Daniel. You love what I have. And that's something you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. She walked out of the room and didn't look back. Behind her, she heard Daniel collapse completely, sobbing into his hands. Mr. Peterson approached her in the hallway. He handed her a sealed envelope. Your grandmother left this personal letter for you, Mrs. Sarah. I think now might be the right time to read it. Sarah took the envelope with trembling hands. She opened it carefully and pulled out a handwritten letter. Her grandmother's familiar handwriting filled the page, and Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she read. My dear Sarah, if you're reading this, then the truth has finally come out. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to see it, but I know you handled it with grace and strength. I built everything I have over a lifetime of hard work, and I did it quietly because I learned early on that loud wealth attracts the wrong kind of people. Real wealth, the kind that matters, is quiet. I wanted you to learn that lesson too. I wanted you to see who truly loved you for you and who only wanted what you could give them. If the people around you are celebrating this blessing with you, then I was wrong about them. and I'm happy to be wrong. But if they're scrambling, apologizing, trying to get back in your good graces now that they know the truth, then you already know what to do. Stay strong, my darling girl. Stay kind. Stay quiet. And use what I've given you to make the world better. I love you forever, Grandma Ruth. Sarah folded the letter carefully and pressed it to her chest. Tears streamed down her face, but for the first time in months, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of release. 1 month later, Daniel's life had completely fallen apart. He lost his job at the marketing firm. They found out he'd been lying about his connections and using company resources for personal things. Without Sarah's credit supporting him, he couldn't afford his apartment. He got evicted. Jessica had already moved on. She met another wealthy man at some bar and blocked Daniel's number, without a word. His mother wouldn't speak to him. You ruined this family's chance at a fortune, Patricia told him coldly. Don't call me again. Daniel tried calling Sarah every single day. He left voicemails. He sent texts. He even showed up at the estate house once, but security turned him away before he could get anywhere near the door. He was alone. Broken. Everything he thought he wanted had turned to dust in his hands. Sarah never responded. Not once. She changed her number. She filed for divorce, and her lawyers made sure Daniel got nothing. The prenup he'd insisted on before they got married, the one he thought would protect his family's money, now worked against him. He had no choice but to sign the papers. He thought he was trading up when he left Sarah for Jessica. But the truth was, he traded a queen for a shadow. And now he had nothing. 6 months after the will reading, Sarah stood in a quiet cemetery in Oregon. The afternoon sun was warm on her skin as she knelt down in front of a simple headstone. Ruth Thompson's name was carved into the stone, along with the words, "A quiet soul who changed the world through kindness." Sarah placed fresh flowers at the base of the headstone. She touched the gold bracelet on her wrist, the one her grandmother had given her all those years ago. "I kept my promise, Grandma," she whispered. "I stayed quiet. I stayed strong. And they showed me exactly who they were." A soft breeze blew through the trees, carrying the scent of pine. Sarah smiled, a real smile, the kind that comes from deep inside, from a place of healing and peace. She stood up slowly. Over the past 6 months, she'd been running her grandmother's technology empire with the same grace and dignity Ruth had shown. She funded scholarships for kids who couldn't afford college. She donated to hospitals. She created programs to help families struggling with medical bills. She helped people the way her grandmother always had, quietly, without needing recognition or praise. Sarah still lived simply. She wore normal clothes despite her billions. She drove a regular car. She lived in a modest house in Oregon, not the mansion in Seattle. She kept the estate, but she turned it into a community center where people could learn job skills and get help when they needed it. Because real wealth wasn't about the money. It was about the impact, the legacy, the love. One evening, Sarah sat in the library of her small house. She opened a journal and began to write, letting her thoughts flow onto the page. The people who love you will love you when you have nothing. The people who leave you when you have nothing were never yours to begin with. She closed the journal and set it on the table. She thought about Daniel, about Patricia and Lauren and Connor, about Jessica. She thought about all the people who treated her like she was worthless. And she realized something important. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to make them pay or suffer or hurt the way they hurt her. Because the truth had already done that for her. The truth always comes out. And when it does, the people who betrayed you have to live with what they've done. They have to look at themselves in the mirror every day and know they lost something priceless because they were too blind to see it. That was enough. Sarah walked to the window and looked out at the stars filling the night sky. She felt peace. Real peace. For the first time in so long, she felt whole. She didn't hate Daniel anymore. She actually felt sorry for him. He'd spent his whole life chasing things that didn't matter: status, appearance, other people's approval. And in doing that, he'd lost the one thing that was real. Sarah learned something through all of this pain. She learned that silence isn't weakness. Quietness isn't boring. Humility isn't the same as being small. Her grandmother was right all along. Real wealth is quiet. Real strength doesn't need to announce itself. Real love doesn't need to prove anything. A few weeks later, Sarah received a letter in the mail. It was from Daniel. She almost threw it away without reading it, but something made her open it. Inside was a single page, handwritten. Sarah, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I lost. Not the money. Not the estate.
You.
I lost you. And that's something I'll regret for the rest of my life. You were always enough. More than enough. I was just too stupid and selfish to see it. I hope you find happiness. Real happiness. You deserve it. Daniel. Sarah read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope, and placed it in a drawer. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Some people come into your life to teach you lessons. Daniel taught her that actions matter more than words. That people show you who they are when they think you have nothing. That real love is quiet, steady, and doesn't change based on circumstances. Sarah looked at her grandmother's bracelet one more time. She thought about all the lessons Ruth had taught her. All the wisdom. All the love. Thank you, Grandma, she whispered to the empty room. For everything. She turned off the light and walked outside into the cool Oregon evening. Above her, the stars shined bright and clear. Sarah smiled. She was free. Truly free. And she was going to spend the rest of her life making her grandmother proud. The end. Remember, real wealth isn't loud. It's quiet. It's in how you treat people when you think they have nothing. It's in the love you give without expecting anything back. And the people who truly matter will love you for who you are, not what you have.